This is Cambodia 1990. 1 year ago, in a film broadcast around the world, we showed that this uniquely tragic country was once more in danger of falling to the greatest mass murderers since Hitler, the Khmer Rouge of Pol Pot, and that Western governments and the United Nations were allowing this to happen for reasons of Cold War politics. The response from the public was unprecedented. Tens of thousands of people wrote to their governments, seeking for Cambodia not charity, but action. Unfortunately, this film is not a celebration of a Cambodia now freed from the threat of another Holocaust. It's about betrayal. A betrayal of those who asked for help for Cambodia, regardless of whether that help meant offending the United States and China, which give direct and indirect support to the Khmer Rouge. Above all, it's a betrayal of a people who have struggled virtually alone to rebuild their stricken country. For tonight's film will show that Western governments are among those secretly providing the means for Pol Pot's return to power.
Lately, Cambodia has become a newspaper headline about peace talks that never bring peace. For those of you who have shown your concern about Cambodia, beware. Recent reports of peace agreements deceive and manipulate public opinion. There have been no agreements, only the imposition of the strategic aims of great powers upon a suffering nation. This has been done by coercion and bribery. What it solves is diplomatic embarrassment. What it threatens is a fragile normality that is the remarkable achievement of the Cambodian people. This is Phnom Penh. For more than a decade, the United Nations, led by the West and China, has isolated these resourceful and resilient people, barring them from all international agreements on trade and communications, even from the World Health Organization. Instead, Pol Pot and his gang have been allowed to occupy Cambodia's seat at the United Nations behind the facade of a coalition invented by America and China, and all because the liberators of Cambodia, the Vietnamese, had the temerity not only to get rid of Pol Pot, but to turn back invasions by both America and China. This is the logic and spite of Cambodia's punishment.
They have started from scratch. I would say worse than scratch. Without means, isolated, without anybody to come and see what was going on in this country, without strength, without human resources that have been decimated. It's incredible, the resilience of these people. And I really feel bad when I read the press outside and the media, and they speak like these people do not exist.
Since the first American bomb fell on neutral Cambodia 21 years ago, the people here have been prey to those who call themselves peacemakers. The latest peace plan has been put forward by the United Nations. The permanent 5 members of the Security Council, which is dominated by the United States and its allies, demand the resignation of the Hun Sen government in Phnom Penh, even though this is Cambodia's only effective government, providing the only opposition to the return of Pol Pot. Under this UN plan, the Khmer Rouge will be given a share of power.
If really the West or the free world or whoever want to help these people, if they are really sincere, then they should come here and see what these people see, and then try to strengthen their sense of, first of all, their dignity, because they don't lose dignity, the Khmer. They die, but they don't lose their dignity. And then strengthen their sense of independence. They are looking in all ways to do that.
Fear is like a presence here. The other day, 56 people were taken off 2 trains and shot dead by the Khmer Rouge simply because they work for the government. Pol Pot's defense minister has boasted an enemies list of 2 million people. When the curfew comes, the night belongs to the prospect of a second Holocaust. At the end of World War II, the Times correspondent, on arrival at the Nazi death camp at Belsen, wrote, "It's my duty to describe something beyond the imagination of mankind." That was how I felt in 1979 when I reached Cambodia in the aftermath of Pol Pot's terror. Once again, it's necessary to come here and say that. Once again, it's necessary to guide the camera to these mass graves, which are everywhere in this country. Here murdered people were dumped, many of them children, headless and naked, horrors that were photographed and documented by Pol Pot's Gestapo, known as S-21. In 3.5 years, 1/5 of the population were put to death. Not a single Western leader has come to the killing fields of Cambodia just to pay their respects, as almost all have done at Belsen and the shrines in Israel. In the past year, there have even been attempts to rewrite the evidence provided by those of us who saw and smelt and cannot forget these graves when they were discovered.
The United Nations Security Council dropped the word genocide from its reference to the Pol Pot years so as not to offend China, Pol Pot's underwriter. American and other Western documents no longer refer to genocide and mass murder, preferring to describe the extermination of more than 1 million people as human rights abuses, or merely the policies and practices of the recent past.
The universally condemned policies and practices of a recent past, unquote, referred to in an earlier report, are in fact the policies and practices of the 1975 to 1978 period.
While the West publicly tries to distance itself from Pol Pot, American officials in embassy background briefings describe the Khmer Rouge as different and changed out of all recognition. This insidious campaign has been echoed in the media. Pol Pot may have been brutal, but he was no mass murderer. He may have been a bit paranoid, but there was no genocide. This article has been widely distributed by Pol Pot's man in New York and by the Foreign Office in London. It says the West must stop moralizing about the Khmer Rouge and reach out to them. It complains that the genocide issue has been exploited to the full, and says that Pol Pot's followers are now regarded as honest and are admired for their discipline and self-respect, qualities that most spheres of Cambodian society lack. This campaign of rehabilitation suppresses the fact that the Khmer Rouge are masters of coercion, intimidation and propaganda. We have evidence of Pol Pot's secret plans to fool Western governments and to take power as he did before. These notes are of secret speeches made by Pol Pot and discussions with his leadership. Pol Pot's spokesman, Q Sampan, who has smiled his way around the world at so-called peace conferences,